Welcome to Trust the Journey, episode 11. I'm Melanie Curtis.
And I'm Jay Maletsky.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're out to create conscious connections, to grow and contribute through our practice of openness and honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust, trusting the entire journey.
In this episode, we're sharing a more personal conversation as I explore the idea of doing ayahuasca for the first time as a next experience in my personal journey. And Jay shares from his experience in spiritual seeking through psychedelics over the last 30 years.
As always, if you get value from the show, if you enjoy this and you want to help us get it out there and spread the word, create a bigger audience, and spread the mission of love, share however you're inspired. We appreciate your help.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for being here. Here we go, episode 11.
Morning.
Good morning. What is up? Hi.
It's early today. Yeah.
I know. We are committed people.
Here, doing it. Yep.
I love that. Forewarning to people watching that because it's earlier, my roommate's still here. She goes for runs in the morning. She's awesome. She's a supporter of our cause and contribution. But the dogs might bark and stuff. So just a heads up, if that happens, it's atypical. Yeah. All right. So this is a pretty unique one, but I'm excited we're doing this.
Me too.
This is good. I've been wondering about this for a long time, learning about it slowly over time. And basically what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to ask some questions about ayahuasca and that as a spiritual tool, growth tool. I just want to learn about it. I've never done it, but I'm considering doing it because I've heard great things from people I trust. And I want to learn more from another person I trust, in this case, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote down some questions per your direction. And I would also ask at the end if there's anything that I've missed that you think I, would need to know that we haven't covered, to please tell me.
Definitely.
Yeah. So basically my first question was like, what made you seek out doing it? Like, how did you hear about it? Like, what made you go after it as an experience?
It's actually a unique way to start the conversation because it's really starting with the end.
Okay.
I would say that ayahuasca was kind of the last step in the psychedelic journey for me, in the spiritual journey. It came to me just recently, just last year, just over a year ago. I finally had my first true ayahuasca ceremony, a multiple day ceremony where you ingest the brew and sit in with the shamans and trained guides, and that was a long time coming. It was 30 years.
Wow.
How did I know? Restate your question again for me, please.
My question, and yeah, I mean, if there's a better place to start, that's
this is perfect.
Fine with me. My question was, what made you seek out doing ayahuasca?
What made me seek it out? Well, I would have to say that through the course of my life, the spiritual journey has been unavoidable. That's not something that I've had a choice about whether it is going to be presented to me. And in that sense, I speak about all forms of spirituality. I speak about our modern mainstream religions that everybody's familiar with. Speak about the exposure to the concepts of fringe types of spirituality, and secondary or third tiers of organized religion, or what some people would refer to as cults in some ways. The different types of spiritual teachings that are out there, and
what does that mean?
Well, that may mean things like yoga is considered to be a spiritual teaching.
Gotcha.
It also might be, certain groups of musicians, or in this case, I also include in there psychedelic compounds. So
Mhm.
things like LSD, or magic mushrooms,
Mhm.
psilocybin, mescaline. All these compounds contain um, very important molecular structures that have been, put here for us to find, to help
Mhm.
guide us on our journey. So they started coming to me 31 years ago now.
Yeah.
And so I would say, yeah, what's led me to this point, it's more like it has come to me than I have gone to it.
Okay. Yeah. And so tell me more then about, you had an experience with a psychedelic compound
Hmm.
31 years ago, and it
Hmm.
started to inform you of what?
Yeah. So my first exposure to psychedelics, I guess, would come through cannabis, smoking weed as a kid, and that's a pretty common experience. I'd say that in the population, that's becoming a greater and greater context. But that's really just kind of a stepping stone in the whole puzzle. That what truly opened my eyes to this understanding was LSD. The first
Okay.
time that I had exposure to LSD, it's like somebody turns a light bulb on and it lightens up the room, and you can see everything that's in there all of a sudden that you couldn't see before,
Mm-hmm.
if you were in like a darkened space. And that I was exposed to a couple times as a younger man, maturing adolescent, and it
Yeah.
definitely changed my concepts of potentiality and ways of possibly thinking. It just created new possible avenues for the mind to go down, as far as what could or may or may not be real or true.
Right. Right. It gave you like it opened the question mark of like, what is real?
Yeah, and I would say, I grew up in a typical Christian household, some semi-typical. We
Mm-hmm.
floated between a number of different denominations in Christianity, but generally Christian. And
Right.
growing up from that, from the time I was born until the time I was a teenager, mid-teens, and then having this exposure, and then realizing there might be something else, because
Right.
I'd
Okay.
only ever heard that there was one way. This is it.
Right.
There's only one God. There's only one set of rules. There's only one set of concepts,
Right.
and that's it. It's the singular concept idea that's monotheism in its entirety. There's one concept, and LSD changed that for me to the point where there's not just one concept, there's infinite concepts.
Mm.
And in irony, it brought it all back to one concept again.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that is interesting to me about this stuff, and just for the record, I have done some things. I have done LSD and I have done magic mushrooms myself, just so that you know. I have not done ayahuasca.
Hmm.
um, I tended to consider this stuff. I've always been relatively resistant to this,
Hmm.
not from an experiential standpoint or a growth standpoint. That idea really appeals to me. Um, I feel like I've often been driven by and blocked by the Nancy Reagan "just say no to drugs"
Oh
thing.
yeah,
And so
me
I'm
too.
curious what you would say to people like that, you know what I mean? Who might hear you going and just be like, "Oh, it's just a fucking excuse to do drugs." You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that mindset could be really easy for people to look at this from, and I say that because that was me for a long, long time.
Yeah. Then their perspective is everything, right? We're well familiar with the concept that until you're able to walk in somebody's shoes, or look through somebody's eyes, or live through somebody else's feelings of experience, that we can't possibly know what it's like from the other side. And even if we've been told or we've been imprinted upon that a concept is there in place to protect us for our own best interest and for people that care about us,
Right.
that context doesn't always necessarily ring true. So here's how I would, and I've had wonderful conversations with people that I very much appreciate and respect and value their ear and their voice on this exact same topic, and spent hours and hours and hours just discussing in depth. And finally, a very interesting conversation. It's one of my favorite ones when people will go take the time to actually kind of process the information, and talk through it, and be able to step out of our emotional connection to a predisposed position.
Correct. That's why the only reason why I ever did anything is because I was like, and it's not like it was just like, reckless choice. It's like the informed choice, I feel like, was my path to even the experiences I've already had. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. I've always been very much like, I want to be informed and with people that I trust, that type of thing. And like really, having experiences that are worthwhile and beneficial, as opposed to just needing like the escape mentality of like, we're going to ingest something or do something like that as an escape versus a growth experience or just an experience that could be positive. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of fear that comes up for me, is I guess my point. Maybe it's that imprinted stuff. Maybe it's the unknown. I'm just, and not that, I mean, I'm sharing this just because I feel like it's relevant to the conversation. I feel like I'm probably a pretty common person, maybe, you know what I mean, in terms of what people might experience when they're considering this from a growth perspective.
I think you're touching on a couple key points that are very important to recognize and very relevant to conversation. So I would agree with your comments there. I would say that first of all, with regard to the Nancy Reagan campaign and the tuning out or dumbing down kind of context that's related to getting stoned,
right?
That concept is something I would say is very real. The idea of don't do drugs because they're bad for you. Yeah, that's pretty true. There is to me, when I look at the categories of what is out there and what people are likely to encounter, is they have stimulants and depressants, right? In whatever form they come in. We start off with alcohol, right? That's the one that's in most people's household, have it on the cupboard and the shelf in the fridge, right? Alcohol is a depressant, right? And cigarettes are a stimulant, right? So these are two legal over the counter that anybody of age can buy. You don't even need a prescription, right? And then you have a wide variety of other things that start to come into the mix with prescription drugs and illegal drugs,
right?
Plus other things that are not actually drugs, but people use them as drugs. So anything that falls into a stimulant category, cocaine or amphetamines or anything in this that ramps your body up high. Anything that falls into the depressant category, like opiates or alcohol, or anything that pulls the body downward and puts you into a dozy state. So you have these two states of stoned, right? You're either really spiked up or really pulled down.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Right? These are drugs.
That's like, I have zero interest in that, like genuinely zero. I'm like, I've made that decision for myself. I'm like, that's not where I want to go with that experience, period.
I totally agree. And I would highly recommend that to stay away from these. I mean, for the most part, they're best only utilized by medical professionals when it's a good time to apply a sedative or a good time to apply a stimulant based on a medical need of some type to address another condition. But really they are forms of medication that should be used in the medicative way.
Agreed.
What we're speaking about right now are a category of entheogens which fall into the psychedelic compounds area. We're talking about things like magic mushrooms, which are psilocin or psilocybin. We're talking about peyote,
Mm-hmm.
which is a recognized and approved cactus. It's the most common one people say is peyote. It's a cactus that contains the compound mescaline, which is
Yep.
found in many cactuses. We're talking about LSD, which is derived from the ergot
Okay.
grain, right? And we're talking about DMT, which is also another molecular compound which exists in many, many, many different types of commonly ayahuasca, used with a mixture of a vine and a leaf in a brew.
Right.
But all these compounds fall into a central category so they're not uppers nor downers. These are entheogens, which means they are compounds that bring you closer to God.
Yeah.
That's the
That
category.
that is what appeals. It also, they're all natural, correct? Like they're
Yeah,
from the earth.
yeah. All
Right.
all exist in some natural state. Yeah, I mean, aside from a few contexts where people use a process to extract something, but it's like coffee doesn't exist until you roast it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So I love that. I'm glad we distinguished that, because I think that's really important to distinguish
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
my perspective as this person whose goal is a growth spiritual path, growth
Mhm.
spiritual experience, expanded, positive, beneficial experience for myself and others, and whatever, opening up my blind spots in ways that I have not, experienced or been able to, in the ways that I've gone into growth as of today. You know what I mean? Like, that's what this is for me, is that exploration of a potential new avenue for that spiritual growth and just personal growth. So given we're talking about it, the goal was to sort of illuminate the ayahuasca experience. And so it's a 31-year journey for you. It was sort of the end, as it were, or you found it recently, like a year and a half ago is what you said, right?
True.
Okay. So I'm curious, like, what your experience was, when you did get there and you're like, oh, I've found this thing. I'm going to, ingest the brew and have the experience with the shaman.
Hmm.
Like, and you had gotten there, like, what was the experience? Like, what did you get from it? What happens or happened to you, I
So
guess, is really more the question.
I I approached it with a very traditional um approach. So the context of the scenario was a group of about a dozen people meeting up with a trained shaman from Peru,
Mm-hmm.
who would be guiding the ceremony over the course of a 3-day weekend.
Okay.
So it's a bit shorter than some of the atypical type of scenarios deep in the jungle, which may last for, say, a week or 2 weeks or
Yeah.
a month, depending
Right.
on which choice you choose. But generally it's about a week, but this is shortened to 3 days, which for me, I felt was actually perfect, what I was kind of looking for, just because I felt like I was arriving pretty prepared. It
Okay.
wasn't as though it was my first psychedelic experience of any kind, and it
Right.
wasn't as though I hadn't had exposure to DMT in the past already. So the main compound in ayahuasca is this molecule called DMT, which, by the way, exists in human body at all
Okay.
times. Everybody has DMT inside of their body already. So it's not a foreign substance. You're not
Mm-hmm.
ingesting something that exists in a plant but doesn't exist in you. You
Mm-hmm.
actually have a gland in your brain called the pineal gland, which produces DMT. So your body actually generates it in on its own at different times in your life at different amounts. And
Fascinating.
the reason and it the reason that it or sorry when it is generated in the most common times during your life is when you're dreaming, when you're asleep and you're in a resting state, and when you are born and when you die. There are large releases of DMT into the bloodstream.
Interesting.
The pineal gland is often referred to as the third eye. It
Mm.
does have the same structure as like an eyeball, an ocular design, and it exists right in the very center, right at the very base of the brain, right at the very bottom. So it's way down in the very old part of the brain, right in the middle.
Yeah.
It also, DMT is a compound that if you picked up a handful of it and ate it, nothing would happen. It does,
Okay.
the body does not accept it. It does not get past the blood brain barrier. So the body is designed to avoid having spikes of DMT unintentionally.
Oh,
You
wow.
couldn't accidentally chew on a plant that's full of DMT and get high from it. That's
Mm.
not how it works,
Okay.
right? You have to ingest it with monoamino acid receptor, MAOI, while you're taking it, so that your body can allow it to be ingested, or so it will actually access the brain.
Gotcha.
So there's some fail safes in place that have been put there by nature
Yeah.
to protect us, to make sure that we don't accidentally run into it, all the time, because it is everywhere. It's in all kinds of plants.
Gotcha.
And okay, going to the ceremony for me, I arrived with I hadn't had any salts or sugars or alcohol or any other kinds of drugs or anything for a period of over a month.
Yeah, I had read about that, like the sort
Yeah.
of preparation, ayahuasca preparation diet to
Mhm.
sort of cleanse your system as much as you can. But yeah, go on.
It's a very spiritual and very holistic approach to not just prepare the body, but to prepare the mind,
Mm.
to clean the slate, essentially. Like if you're about to sit down for a very important meeting,
Mm-hmm.
you want to have a clean desk, right? If you're
Right.
about to meet with somebody who's ultimately or
Yeah.
ultimately important, you don't
Right.
want to have anything else on the desk. You want to be all prepared and ready for this type of interaction.
Yeah.
And so that prepares the stomach, it prepares the gut, and it prepares your mind to be able
Mm-hmm.
to take this. And so all the food is prepared for the group while you're there, and done in a very thoughtful and a very caring way. That everything is, it's about mental healing, it's
Yeah.
about mental grounding,
Yeah.
or ungrounding if that's what's needed, right?
Right. Right.
But
Right.
it's really a very caring and considerate and mentally and physically composed event. And then, we meet the shaman and we sit down for some hours together and talk
Mm-hmm.
about some of the situations that we may encounter, about how the process is going to go, about the ceremony specific, and kind of the flow of how things will work through the course. So an orientation, and then back to our rooms to relax and wait and talk and,
Yeah.
eat or not eat, depending if you're getting ready for the ceremony. You may have a period of fasting beforehand. It can cause nausea for some
Mm-hmm.
people. So, yeah. And then, yeah, once the ceremony starts, you ingest a small cup of fluid. It's like having a cup of tea that doesn't taste very good.
Yeah.
And and then the adventure or the journey begins, or, for as I would say, for me, it ends.
Yeah.
um I arrived with no preconceived idea of what I thought it would be or wouldn't be. I very specifically chose to be free of question or preconceived notion, or wanting to be in control, or wanting to get an answer. I really I'm quite happy with the fact that when I did finally arrive there, I was probably as prepared as I could ever be, is that I really didn't even need to be there or want to be there. It was there because I was finally ready to be there.
Right.
And that let me appreciate the experience and just be the receptor, be the student, and be open to the experience without trying to make the experience into something that I wanted to make it into.
Yeah.
Which was perfect. And then the very moment that it began, I realized I'd spent the last 30 years preparing for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The very second that I felt the first moment of onset, I'm like, oh, I have been training, I've been practicing, I've been preparing for 3 decades for this moment. And now I arrive, the well-trained student,
Yeah.
ready to,
That's so
yeah.
interesting. I love how that ties into so much of the rest of the stuff that we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
One of my questions was basically like, what would you recommend to a first time person? And that's the thing. It's like, well, okay, 30 years of training, which sounds like one of the recommendations.
It just happened to be mine. I don't know
Yeah,
that I would necessarily say that that's the right path for everybody. Everybody has their own journey, but
sure.
I found that when I arrived, I realized that why my life had contained the journeys in it that it had contained up to that point. They had all been part of my training, part of what I needed to do to prepare me to arrive to this ceremony with everything I would need mentally in my experience book to be able to then receive what I was going to receive at that moment.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate to that, because basically how this came into my sphere, how I even heard about this, was through my best friend. She found it and, has been, in ceremony multiple times over the last 2 years, and just really growing through this spiritual practice in medicine. And so I've learned a lot through her experiences, through her knowledge of it. And obviously I trust her. So I was considering doing it a year ago, and I just didn't feel ready, like I felt too scared. Like I just didn't feel like the right time for me. And I trust that, like I really trust myself. And so like, I still feel, it's interesting because I feel even more comfortable in the inquiry because I know that I'm not pressuring myself to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, having this conversation with you does not mean I'm gonna have to per my own direction or pressure, go and do this. I might never do it. I might never do it. I am called to the inquiry enough that I'm in the inquiry. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And so I find myself queried about this, I would say fairly regularly. And I feel like it's one of the duties of the experienced to pass information forward. That's part of your role. And have exposure to this life experience, to this, then it is truly your responsibility to pass it forward and to be a vessel to carry that information to those who are looking for answers. So this would be the 3rd time in 3 days that I've been asked about this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite common, actually.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
I'm very empowered by that. I'm very honored by that. I feel on path. I feel as though the work that I'm doing in this area is the work that I truly should be doing, and that it has great positive effect in the world and in people's lives that look for it. And so to my point, what I was going to say, you don't find it, it finds you. Yeah. You don't make the choice, I'm ready to do this now.
Yeah.
It tells you you're ready.
Cool.
Yeah. It comes to you and finds you, and the life circumstances suddenly occur now you've been presented with an opportunity or found a channel or a road. There's something that's like, all of a sudden now this is a potential that exists for you.
Right.
Or you start looking for that potential subconscious, that internal driven instinct is our soul.
Yeah.
That is our soul speaking outwardly through the body, trying to direct our physical form to where our emotional body needs to be.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, it's like that trusting of the intuition, like if to put it in sort of more general or universally used known terms, like that's how I would think of that. Like, but yeah,
I like to think
yeah,
I
go
like
ahead.
I like to think of it like the guardian angel saying,
Hmm.
he's saying, "Oh, you've got an angel looking out for you." Yeah, I'm like, "Yes, it's my soul." Yeah,
Right.
I'm like,
Yes, it's me.
it's that little voice in the back of my head is
Yeah.
actually me looking out for me, instead of
Yeah.
the like me that I put forward, that
Yeah,
I've created to show the world.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What would you say to a first time person? Like say they have found it and it is a, sort of an
Mhm.
aligned time, and it is the right, I say that definitely with air quotes, time for that person. What would you say to them?
I have not met anybody whose first choice, whose first endeavor towards an entheogen has been ayahuasca.
Mm,
Everybody who I've met, or I've spoken to on this topic, it seems as though the path, and when I've discussed this with other aficionados, about other seekers, other
yeah.
spiritual people who are looking down these roads, we've discussed like, what's the best road when you have somebody who's had no exposure and they're
Right.
looking to dip their finger in the water because they want to test the waters.
Yes.
And ayahuasca is an incredibly powerful experience. It is like diving into a boiling sea, like you're diving into a rolling surf for your first time to go swimming is a questionable decision.
Right.
Maybe you
Right.
want to start by wading into the water, ankle deep or knee deep first. But you could also listen to some of Terence McKenna's speaking, and he says, don't dabble. Don't mess around. If you were going to go and you're going to explore, dive into the water and
Yeah.
really swim in the water and experience it full on. And so I would advise most people, first of all, that none of the psychedelic compounds are recreational drugs. They should not be used in, say, a party context where you
Right.
like, oh, I'm going to try some mushrooms, or I'm going to try some
Yeah.
LSD, or I'm going to try some mescaline at a party. This is
Yep.
a terrible decision. You should
Yes, I agree.
absolutely not try one of these types of entheogens at a party. These are spiritual experiences. Along with that, I'll also say that there's no such thing as bad acid or bad mushrooms or anything. The bad trip that we hear people speak about, which I think is one of the bigger fears that
Yeah.
exists in a lot of us, is this fear of unknown, fear of what could happen. If I take this, am I going to stay away forever? The kind of context that people, when they first start to have onset of a psychedelic experience, they feel their consciousness shifting and their perspective shifting, and everything's no longer the way that they're used to seeing it. And suddenly there's this fear that maybe it's never going to go back to the way that it was before. And the irony in that is that it's true.
Right.
It's never going to go back to the way that it was before,
Right.
because now you've seen the world through another lens. So you have a new set of memories that you're now different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you don't go back to seeing it the way you did before. Everything goes back to looking exactly the same as it was. And it may even feel lackluster,
Right.
for having lost some of that, additional light that's been shed on a normal circumstance. But in that sense, you'll definitely return. Will definitely go backwards to the world will continue to operate the way that you're familiar with it operating. But I would advise against somebody who has done zero research. And when I say research, if you haven't
Yeah.
encountered psilocybin or 2CB or one of these other more introductory types of experiences,
Yeah.
if you dive right into ayahuasca, you might have a very difficult time processing how much is in there,
Right.
because really it's about you, it's about your entire existence, your whole life history, maybe of many lives, maybe, you know, many consciousness wrapped together. So I advise taking a slower start for
Yeah,
most people.
that was one of my questions, was
Mhm.
who would you tell not to do it? You know, what, like, another thing is like, what are the risks that you are aware of? You know, like, what I've definitely read some stuff about, like, people now looking at ayahuasca as this, basically it's becoming more popular, as it were, and I,
Tourism, you
whatever
mean?
that means, you know, and like there's obviously articles and stuff out there that I've read that is like, you know, make sure you work with a shaman that is real and reputable, and, you know, I don't know really what that means. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? All I
for
know
sure.
is that I have read in my own research, you know, I have read that there are things to look out for. So I'm curious what you know about that stuff.
Well, I happen to be holding in my hand a photograph of a card that I recently read. It comes from the Dance Safe organization. So www.dancesafe.org. You can
Cool.
go on their website and you can find all kinds of information about drugs, both recreational and entheogen. And in their information, they do an excellent job of an unbiased guide to what it is, what are the uses, what are the effects, what is the dosages, and what to be careful of. And so very powerful work. I'm a very big fan of the work that they're doing in the community, in our society. Great people, great effort. So the risks associated with DMT and or ayahuasca is if you have high blood pressure conditions or family history, a personal history of mental illness, if you're in a psychological, emotional state of turmoil, if things are not settled for you. And so that's one of the things I would say with any entheogen. If you're in a very challenging point in your life, this may not be the way to get your feet back to the ground. It could knock
Yeah.
you even more spiraling out of control. So, you know, I would say that the more valuable things like diet, exercise, meditation,
Yep.
those types of things, you know, I mean, you can include prayer and meditation if you want, you know, just any types of things that are going to be more self-serving, self-centering, self-grounding
Yep.
practices are going to be the things you want to look to if you're, you know, in an emotional state
I
that
love
needs to be
that.
grounded, you
I
know?
love that. The reason I love that is, and just to quickly interject,
Yeah.
I love hearing that because it's so, we hear it all the time, you
Yeah.
know, like, and I literally like just yesterday I posted something like how exercise is the most
Oh
underused
my gosh.
antidote to depression and fear. And
And
it's so
nature,
true. And nature, yeah, like being
nature.
out in the air, in the open air in nature, and how truly spiritually, emotionally, physiologically
Mhm.
supportive that is, you know. And yeah, it's not the sexiest, coolest response, or what people might, you know, want, the people who want that quick answer and stuff
It
like that.
doesn't come in a bottle, you know?
Yeah, like it's not like it's a choice we make to do that. You know, I love that because it feels very, very, very basic and very, very empowering in that basic. You know what I mean? Like in this discussion, like this that distinction, I appreciate that because I never want to be the person who stands for like the big thing, you know. It's more just like, I feel like in my, what I'm learning about, like, say, people who do decide to do an ayahuasca ceremony or multiple ceremonies as part of their spiritual path and growth, is that it's another part, it's another thing that is a part of that path. It is not like the answer. Like that always makes me go, oh, but again, this is what I'm gathering from a non-experienced, an unexperienced perspective with ayahuasca specifically. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it matters.
So here's the thing, when I talk about this concept as with people, what I like to how I like to reference it is I say, if I told you that I have the key to the universe and everything,
Right.
first question, would you believe me?
Right.
Would you believe me? Because you'd probably just think I'm a crazy guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Jay, sure, whatever. Yeah,
Right.
the universe. I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. I have the whatever. Second, if you believed me, would you ask me to use it?
Right.
And then there's a difference between having the key and having the universe.
Right.
Right? The key is just a key. Right? It's just a door. It just unlocks the lock. You have to open the door.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to look and explore the universe and interact with and understand the universe. Like, it's just a key.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference in this context,
Yeah.
So think about
So
that.
that's useful.
Yeah.
It's
So
useful.
let me answer some more of your other question. There are some risks associated with ayahuasca, with DMT, as there are with any kinds of drugs or compounds. I mean, if you're allergic to shellfish, there's a risk of eating shrimp. So MAOIs are contradictory, and there's a variety of foods that if you've taken things like soy sauce or other drugs like Prozac, that you shouldn't take in ayahuasca. And there are a few different compounds that fall into the category of DMT. The ayahuasca brew and extracted DMT are two different things in their what you're actually holding in your hand if you're holding it. And then there's 5-MeO DMT, which is another psychedelic compound, which is one molecule slightly different but almost the same. All these are illegal in the US, which is very ironic that there's a compound that your body makes that's part of you that's illegal.
Right.
I don't understand that. It really confuses me. That's to say, like, fingernails are illegal.
Right.
How did somebody make a decision that part of our physiological being is not allowed to be?
Right.
Right? That's a really scary thought in its whole, that there's somebody trying to take part of your body away and say, don't look at that, don't access that, don't talk about it, don't think about it, you're not allowed to have it. It's part of you, but you can't have it. You were born with it, right? So that's a very powerful thing. Overall, the risks are pretty low with ayahuasca. They're very low likelihood of anything physiological happening to you. Chances of something happening to you if you encounter a stimulant or a sedative like alcohol or cocaine are very high. Those risks are much, much greater than, say, something like an entheogen or ayahuasca or psilocybin or LSD. The physical risks of something going wrong in those are actually very, very low in relativity.
Yeah. I feel like we've already touched on the last question that I have would be like, what would you say are the benefits in the, what are the benefits in the experience? Or I guess it's more like, what were the benefits in your experience? If you want to expand on that, you can.
Well, I would say that I have a hard time separating ayahuasca from other entheogens as a whole.
Okay.
Because I find that they are all tied together in that they function in the same way, which is they allow me access to a part of my being, which is what I would say my true self.
Yeah. I like the idea of that. The access that we don't have day to day, or that is layered with the stuff that life and growing up and society and just the belief the beliefs layered and how powerful the mind can be, that like, I don't know, there's a part of me that likes the idea of having an experience that helps me see more of that. Like I've heard ayahuasca described as like 10 years of therapy in one weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an appealing thought to me, an appealing experience, given I am in the definitely the personal process of growing personally and taking away those limiting beliefs and growing in my consciousness and growing in my, you know, authentic, what are my values, who am I, how do I want to be and lead, all of those things that are, I feel like, very much more accessible in terms of ideas. You know what I mean? Like that's probably not, doesn't sound super strange to someone who's never thought about this or talked about this type of what is the word?
Entheogen.
Entheogen, right? Experience or tool
Of the earth. Yeah.
Of the earth. Oh, I love that. Thank you. I didn't know that. Yeah. So like, given I am on that path of clearing that stuff away, and I'm on that path to ideally help others also.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an appealing thought. It's an appealing thought that I could have a breakthrough or multiple or whatever, or maybe not, you know. And that's the thing. I'm like, I kind of want to get to a place where I'm like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And I feel like I am at that place in terms of like, you know, when and if I do this, it would be sort of with that hands off, like I'm informed. I feel like it's time. My intuition is saying yes. I trust myself. I've prepared. I'm respecting of the process and the potentiality here. And what I get, I get. If it's, you know.
Let me say this. I do feel that there is a very conscious push in our society away from the just say no mentality and towards the, well, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, kind of concept. And that's a great way to do it. Maybe is a much better way of thinking than yes or no.
Yeah, I love it.
A maybe just says maybe not, you know, and that gives room for it to go either way.
Yeah.
I do want to add that if you're already, I think you're in a good place just listening to you speak. You know, you have some exposure to some psychedelic compounds already in your life. You have some idea what it's like to be in an altered state.
Yes.
Not just, this wouldn't be an introductory experience.
Yep.
That's a very powerful stepping stones in the process. But I also want to address the kind of ayahuasca tourism or shaman tourism type of piece, is that in saying that it's 10 years of therapy in a weekend, well, this is a very tedious type of concept to put on the table, because that's kind of offering the fix all in a bottle, like here's my elixir, you know, drink my elixir and you'll have all the answers to your problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's just not true, you know. It's a practice. And here's why I would say, when I listen to you speak, I know that you're on the right road, is that you're working on many things in your life in parallel, right? So we're not just wandering through life looking for an answer, but not taking any actions towards building that in the greater context. You're not making a collection of things together that are reinforcing you from all sides.
Yeah.
And thinking that you can go away for a weekend or a week or whatever and come back and have everything be much better, well, that's a pretty questionable thought in any sense, you know. That's like jumping on to any train of whatever cult you might think
exactly.
be, you know? Like, I went to an Amway weekend once, you know, I know exactly how that goes, you know. But there are, if you think about it as in a form of therapy, if you have a breakthrough in therapy, that's a huge thing, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
able to get down to some root, because many, I mean, typical therapy, you know, you go for session after session after session, whether it's physical or mental, and
Yeah.
you're looking to gradually get access to and repair or identify problems, relate with those problems, relate with those issues, and start addressing them. And so if you have a physical therapy issue and you're dealing with part of the physical body, or if you have mental therapy and you're talking your way through and thinking about different things that need attention, this works in this very similar way. You're working on things inside your own head, inside your being, that you want to come to bring to a better state of understanding,
Yeah.
and be able to kind of reach a new opening with relationship to for yourself. These are very powerful ways to help that process along,
Yeah,
you
the
know?
something I feel like I can't remember when I read this, but I remember reading something like you know, on a website or just some resource I was reading about this. And one of the things they mentioned was like integration. You know, like you could have as many breakthroughs as you want. You could go, but if you like don't have a plan or an intention to integrate the breakthroughs and the insights that you have. And that's where I see, I mean, even if we just talk about freaking life coaching, what I do with people conversationally as a teammate, like if there isn't an implementation plan, you know, an actioning of the new insights that we discover, then nothing changes.
Absolutely.
You know, nothing changes. So so that supports me in this conversation and this idea, because I love that it's not saying it's a magic potion and it's the answer and go and have an ayahuasca ceremony and you'll be, you know, yeah, you'll be forever altered, but it's not like it will forever alter your overall holistic life unless you decide to make that so.
You know, I'm totally agree with you. It's all about a practice in your life, about working towards improving your self-awareness and actions to change self is based on those awarenesses, right? So bringing these things to light, having ability to be able to see them for what they are, and then making actions in your life to change what you are, so that the next time you look at it, you're happier with what you see.
Yeah.
And so I would say that, I mean, for me, the psychedelic experience has been the most powerful light shined
Mm-hmm.
inside my own head. The time when I've been able to like get a flashlight and like look around in there and go, what's going on in there? And look in my own heart and go, what's going on in there? You know, what are you really feeling? What really, you know, like, what are the things that are eating you alive that you don't even know it? And what are the things that, you know, that are waiting for you next? What are the possibilities that are there?
Yeah. I kind
There's a
of
few
love.
things I want to mention before we get low on time
Yeah,
here.
please, please.
Yeah.
That was my next thing. I was kind of laughing
Yeah.
because the sun is
Yeah.
like illuminating my head because we're a different time of day than we normally
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
I was like, that is this comedy.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah, please.
the light's shining on you right now. Yeah.
But yeah, tell
So
anything else that you think would be useful for this conversation before we end. Yeah.
I'm I'm a mentor, I'm a leader, I'm a champion in competition, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach. People always ask me questions, Jay, if you could tell anybody, you know, what would you tell them? And I say, get as much information as you can from as many reputable sources as possible, and compile your own decision based on all the information that you've collected. Don't ever be prey to one source of information. So with that, I recommend reading Rick Strassman's book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule. It's a
Okay.
medical study done under the approval of the FDA in the US here.
Awesome.
As a doctor, Rick Strassman. There's also a movie called The Spirit Molecule, which was made not too long ago, based on that book and a lot of the people involved with it. I recommend reading. There's tons of information available on the internet, places like dancesafe.org and websites like arrowids.org,
Okay.
EROWIDS, Arrowids.
Okay.
As well, there are, All right, my computer just started talking to me there.
No
There
problem.
is a temple in Peru, which comes highly recommended by many of my spiritually connected friends and who live around the globe. The Temple of the Way of the Light, if you want to read about what they have to offer.
Okay.
And they're a very conscientious practice. It's just a great place to get some research and another link to go looking down, the Temple of the Way of the Light.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd recommend looking inside yourself whenever you're starting to think about it. It's your soul speaking to you, saying, hey, pay attention to me. I need help. I need nurture. I need love. Not
Yeah.
just your physical body, not just your mind, the front side of your brain, but the back side says, love me too, means love
Yeah.
myself too. Pay attention to my greater needs.
That's amazing. That's a perfect place to end, I feel like. Thank you so much. This is super helpful.
Pleasure talking with you. I look forward to more.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening, for being here, for being a part of the family, the Trusted Journey family. Please tweet, share, post, email, all that stuff, however you are inspired or with anyone you think this show might help.
Join us next time on episode 12, where we'll be talking about growth and how part of the longer term process of growth includes refinement, outlining, absorbing, and iterating new ideas and actions in that effort, in both work and self.
Heck yes. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We say it every week. We love you.
Love you.
And remember, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep trusting the journey.